Glucose waveform representation and its impact on TSI VMT energy distribution Part 2, number 1614, VPT 121, April 26, 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: TSI Models, Diabetes. Glucose waveform behavior across measurement methods. The glucose data further supports the waveform interpretation. Finger-derived A1C shows improvement followed by a rebound in 2026. This rebound occurred during the stroke recovery period and is consistent with the timing of brain repair and neuroplasticity. CGM-derived A1C follows a similar trend to Finger A1C, but appears smoother and slightly higher, capturing peak glucose behavior. Laboratory A1C shows a delayed and smoothed response, meaning it averages glucose over a longer period and does not capture short-term ups and downs. These differences indicate that CGM captures the full glucose waveform with 96 time points each day. Finger-piercing measurements capture only for selected time points, and laboratory A1C reflects a long-term average. The differences among these measurements come from missing short-term changes and averaging effects, rate and measurement error. Cross-system coupling and regime transition with physics-based interpretation. Most important observation is the coupling behavior across systems. During 2020 to 2021, TSI seizure is low. TSI stroke is decreasing, and glucose is improving except lab A1C, indicating a low-energy stable regime dominated by metabolic control. However, from 2020 to 2025, both TSI seizure and TSI stroke elevated sharply while glucose remains relatively stabilized. This indicates decoupling, where glucose is no longer the dominant driver, but SPP came into play more dominant trigger role. By 2026, all systems show slight worsening, representing post-event relaxation with residual instability, and this year, post-stroke structural repair, increased neural sensitivity, and recovery factors such as sleep become dominant. The system behavior reflects multiplicative coupling, nonlinear phase transition, and hysteresis. TSI changes are driven by amplification through interactions rather than additive contributions. The sharp rise during 2020 to 2024 in both TSI stroke and TSI seizure represents a regime shift. The persistence of elevated TSI risk values despite relatively stabilized glucose reflects system memory, consistent with viscoplastic behavior and biophysics. Core finding and scientific positioning and conclusion. The data of TSI and 3 different kinds of glucoses have shown a transition from a metabolism-controlled system to a structure and recovery controlled system. While glucose control remains necessary, I is no longer sufficient after structural damage occurs. The amplified neural and vascular interactions become the dominant drivers of system behavior. This study does not attempt to evaluate the clinical accuracy of A1C methods or replace diagnostic standards. Instead, it examines system sensitivity to signal representation and the role of glucose waveform structure in different mortality diseases energy accumulation. The physiological system remains unchanged, while only the 3 different representations of glucose varies. Therefore, differences in VMT energy distribution arise from how the signal is measured, sampled, and filtered. CGM, finger, and laboratory A1C should not be viewed as competing measurements, but as different lenses observing the same metabolic system. This perspective allows deeper understanding of how biological systems respond not only to glucose magnitude, but to its temporal structure. VMT analysis results. The results from this VMT energy study demonstrate a clear and consistent pattern. First, the 3 A1C measurements finger, CGM, and lab contribute almost equally to the total VMT energy, with each accounting for approximately 1/3. This confirms that all 3 methods are reliable and capture the same underlying glucose condition. However, a small but consistent difference is observed. The CGM-based A1C is slightly higher than the other 2. This is expected because CGM collects 96 data points per day and operates continuously. It captures more short-term fluctuations, including minor glucose variations. Over the 7.6-year period, these fluctuations accumulate, resulting in a slightly higher total energy contribution. In simple terms, CGM provides a more detailed and complete signal. The general VMT energy contribution ORD is CGM greater than finger greater than lab second. The timing of VMT energy changes pivot years follows a meaningful sequence. Cardiorenal system, 2020 for stroke-related system, 202. 1 seizure-related system, 22 to this sequence reflects a logical physiological progression. The body does not fail abruptly. Instead, dysfunction develops step by step. It typically begins with metabolic stress, which first affects blood vessels and kidneys. This stress then impacts the brain's blood supply, particularly the cerebral microvessels, increasing stroke risk, with further accumulation of damage. The disturbance extends to the brain's electrical system, leading to seizures. This progression can be summarized as metabolic stress from glucose gives vascular stress in heart and kidneys gives brain vascular structural instability, stroke risk gives brain electrical instability, seizure risk. Third, despite large differences in total VMT energy levels among the three conditions, with seizure showing the highest level, the relative contribution from the three A1C inputs remains nearly unchanged. This indicates that the system is not driven by a single dominant factor, but by the interaction and amplification among multiple factors. In summary, three key conclusions can be drawn. All three A1C measurements are consistent and reliable. CGM captures more detailed fluctuations and therefore shows a slightly higher VMT energy contribution. And the sequence of system changes follows a physiologically meaningful progression and aligns with known pathophysiological mechanisms. In addition, during the past 10 years, my CVD and CKD did not return. The VMT results explain this clearly. The cardiorenal system shows much lower total VMT energy 459 than the stroke 730 and seizure systems 10,923, indicating that its stress level remained under control. This suggests that my long-term lifestyle management effectively protected the heart and kidneys, while the brain systems remained more sensitive to accumulated stress. My seizure VMT energy is very high because the brain's electrical system behaves differently from the vascular system. Seizures are nonlinear and threshold-based. Once a limit is crossed, the response becomes sudden and strong, creating large energy spikes. In my VMT energy model, this effect is further amplified by factors such as sleep. Because the structure is multiplicative, these amplifications lead to much higher total VMT energy. In addition, the brain is more sensitive and less tolerant to stress than the heart and kidneys. Vascular systems change gradually, but neural electrical activity can become unstable very quickly. In simple terms, the heart and kidneys behave like stable systems, while the brain's electrical system behaves like an amplifier. This is why seizure VMT energy is much higher. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property right and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to THE author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.